we're artificially creating a loss of vacuum, but we're not doing it with the lobe separation. We're doing it by creating a controlled vacuum leak. And what we're creating, I believe, is a very tiny vacuum leak. It's just a little bit bigger than what the filter position under the, it's just a little bigger than what the normal vacuum intake is through that filter media when the cap is in place, because I believe when we fold that filter over the edge, we're increasing the distance between the end of the nipple, and on the inside of the cap there's a nipple, a plastic nipple that pushes up against it, or at least very, very close to it. And so by taking the filter and turning the direction, we're actually making it a little bit easier for the EGR valve to pull in the air. And by making it easier, essentially we're creating a larger, I think we're creating a larger vacuum leak. And then of course the larger vacuum leak is causing the stall and then the surge. So it's stall, surge, stall, surge, stall, surge, and then that's what you're getting with your lope. So I think I understand the mechanics of how it's happening. And it's pretty neat. It's pretty cool. I'm really stoked that I'm not seeing codes. It'll be very interesting if I get all the way home and I don't have that P0402 code. That'll be pretty cool. So I think the main thing that we'll have to watch out for is we'll double check the EGR valve body temperature down on the cast iron portion. You see where I'm shooting the laser from my tool, the non-contact thermometer tool. If the EGR valve runs very hot all the time, right, when you're driving, my guess is it will reduce the life of the EGR valve, because heat basically kills, and excessive heat kills electronics, especially quickly. So for instance, if you might get 100,000 miles out of an EGR valve, you know, if you drive like this all the time, who knows, you might only get 30 or 40,000 miles out of an EGR valve. I mean, I don't know. That's a total guess, but that's just my thought as to what the detriment could be and what the risk that you may be taking. But, you know, EGR valves are replaceable. And again, you don't need to run this all the time, right? You can run it. You can run it sometimes. You can run it for a car show. You can do whatever. But that's the main thing that I see as the risk so far to what we're doing. So let's see how it goes. We'll check the numbers and keep a close eye on it. So the whole reason that the little sponge filter is there is because, you know, any place where the engine is taking in air from the environment, outside air, you want to filter that air. You don't want to bring in unfiltered air into the engine, because it could have dust particles, too much moisture, you know, whatever, and that can start to damage, you know, the engine over time. So even by creating what we're doing, even by creating the larger vacuum leak, we're still ensuring that that air is filtered. Because some guys might just try to say, oh, I'm just going to take this thing out and stick this thing back in there. And even if it works very similarly, the risk is they're not filtering that EGR vacuum air, and that could be getting dirt into the engine. So something else to keep in mind. I will say that when you pop the cover off and then you go to remove and relocate the sponge filter, you do have to place it in there in a certain way, because the first time I did it, I got lucky and it worked perfectly right away. Today, when I started to do it at first, it was trying to die. The car was trying to die and it wasn't running right. And then I adjusted the position a little bit of the foam, and then, slapped the cap all the way back in, and it was working great, just like it did, I think, what was it, last Saturday or Friday. So that was nice to see. And people will need to know that if it doesn't work right, you have to adjust the position of the foam gasket. All right, so I drove all the way home. I just wanted to share a couple of other observations for you. Okay, so from a manual car, from a stick car standpoint, this is a little less viable only because it does create some drivability issues, and I'm going to get into that right now. So let's say I hit some traffic on the way home. So normally when I'm in traffic, I'm in first or second gear, and as traffic's crawling along, I'm leaving it in first gear, and I'm just crawling along with the traffic, basically idling. Well, with the chop mod, obviously the car is like surging. It's just very kind of herky-jerky, and it's surging along. So that doesn't feel too good, and that does make it a little more challenging to drive in stop-and-go heavy traffic. The other thing, like I said, is that it's definitely when you're under 1500 RPM and you are not on the gas, meaning you're not touching the pedal at all, the chop starts to kick in under 1500 in the manual car with what I have is the Steeda Performance Tune. So that means that when you're coasting, like I said, in third or fourth gear, you can definitely feel it starting to activate, which kind of doesn't make your coasting as smooth as you're used to. But again, it's not that big a deal. You can push the clutch in, you can put it in neutral, do whatever you got to do. But it's just a little bit of a different driving dynamic than what you're used to. However, if you're on the gas, even off idle, so say above 1000 RPM, even if you're coasting along in, say, second gear, third gear, even first gear, it's not active. There's something in the fact that it's when you're on the gas, it's not chopping at all, at least for me. So that means that it's not smooth. It's not like it's unsmooth to accelerate or operate. It feels, for the most part, completely normal. But if you let off the gas, then that's when it'll start to do it. So I got more thoughts on this, but I'll continue with a different message. So I'm going to say my final verdict is this. If you're a manual car owner, it's not an ideal situation for you to do this mod and to drive your car like that every day. I don't think it's necessarily viable. Now, does that mean you can do it? Absolutely, you can do it. And you can adjust your driving style so that you can compensate for the chop. However, myself personally, I like it. It's fun to play with. I might like to do it on the weekends, whatever. But I don't think I'm going to leave it set up like this 100% of the time. The other thing I can definitely say is that after driving 40 miles on the way home here, it does make the exhaust louder. It's not a lot louder, but it's a little bit louder, and it is noticeable. And so I think that some guys might really like that. The engine seems a little throatier. The exhaust's a little bit louder. I took some screenshots from my, I've got an internal sound dB meter on my phone. So I took some screenshots of that. It's generally, I think, about 1, maybe 2 dB louder than it normally is when you don't have this mod going. Which is similar to, in my car, it's similar to when you have the air conditioning on, which makes the exhaust sound stronger and throatier, versus when the air conditioning is off. So it's similar to that. But if you double up, if you have the mod going and you turn on your air conditioning, like I needed to do to defrost the windows because it was raining, then it's even a little bit louder, a little bit throatier. So, you can kind of like go into sport mode if you have the mod and you flip on the AC. It's kind of fun. The other thing that I'm going to say is I think, I set the idle down to 750, and you get a much nicer chop. But I think for driving and, starting off in first gear, I think 850 is a little more manageable. And so I'm all the way home now. I parked in the garage, and I got roughly, again, 24 miles per gallon. Which is good. I did hit some traffic, which is kind of surprising. So I'm going to say the MPGs is almost negligible in terms of what you may lose. And I would also report that I have 0 codes. Almost 50 miles, stop-and-go traffic, highway loops, no codes. So that is very encouraging. I will also confirm I double-checked the EGR body, and it was 480 to 490 Fahrenheit. Which is still pretty warm, but I don't know that it's anything dangerous.
So you take the filter, instead of it being in like this, you just simply turn it sideways, put it up against, push in the corners a little bit, make sure it's in place. Take your cap, see if I have it in here right. It's a little hard to do with one hand, but no, I think I got it upside down. But yeah, you just put it sideways and pop the cap back on, just like so, and that's it. So here's a few key things that you have to know before doing this. So you keep this in mind. You're doing this at your own risk. So keep that in mind. So from Tom tested out the data, and the engine temperature stayed for him between 170 and 190 for his manual 4.0. For me, my temperature stayed between 180 and 199 before my fan kicked on. I do have a tune that, the fan kicks on at 199 degrees to cool off, and I have a different tune than he has, and of course long tube headers, no cats, and so forth. Spark advance still 18 to 30. You may get a possible check engine code 90402. However, once Tom cleared it, it did not come back, and he drove over 40 minutes. It did not come back. So once it came and cleared the codes, it didn't come back. The EGR body gets super hot. So Tom tested it out. I'll be doing some more testing. The EGR temperature, he took it off, he drove to work normal in the morning, and the temperature was 300 plus. With the mod, I'm not quite sure what time of day it was, but with the mod EGR done, the temperature was over 500 degrees. So you must know this. Over time, with this mod on for long periods of time, and over time, it will cut back on the life of your EGR. EGR's cost, I've seen on eBay for $60, but that was a no-name brand knockoff. I probably wouldn't trust it. So the ones that I've seen that had good reviews, you're going to pay anywhere from $100 to $180. And $180 is the top of the line name brand. So keep that in mind. We don't know the life expectancy of the EGR with this mod done. It could, if you have a brand new one, it could last 30,000 miles. I think stock, they estimated like 100,000 miles for the stock without doing the mod. So maybe you'll get 50,000, maybe 80,000, maybe 90,000, maybe 20,000 miles, non-stop. We don't know at this point. That is unknown. But so far, with the temperature rising, there was no burning smell, there was no smoke, there was no, any hissing or anything. So we didn't see any issues with the higher temperature, but also keep this in mind. Do it under your own discretion, under your own risk. With anything, any mods, there's always a risk, so keep those in mind.